Okay, I want to discuss the latest developments around the Hong Kong situation as I see them, not just within Hong Kong, but around the situation. Um, I think it's getting to a bit of a vital point in this. There was that very tense situation around the PolyU standoff, where the students were literally holed up in the campus and they were surrounded by police. They'd set fire to the entrance, which I thought was pretty stupid, but there's a lot of tactics now being used within the protest movement I don't necessarily agree with. But it is, at the same time, it's showing the desperation that many of these young people feel. Now, that was stupid because they're only putting themselves in danger with that. So, I cannot condone those sort of actions. And I've been very clear that I cannot condone violence by the protesters either. There has been some terrible violence on both sides, but I still don't believe it's a level playing field. I don't see this as two warring camps standing off against one another, and I've chosen one side. I see this as a brave, important movement for democracy, for greater transparency, for a whole range of values that I endorse against major power, against a rising superpower. So it's not a level playing field. Um, Yesterday I went to Newcastle and I was a little bit late. There were some problems in the metro. That's a whole other video, bus replacements, etc. So I was a bit late for the event itself. However, I did get to speak to some young students from Hong Kong. Now, I have to say, those young people were very polite. They were very grateful that I'd come, even though I was sort of late, and they were sort of wrapping it up at this point. There was only about 8 of them. But we had a very interesting conversation for about 20 minutes, and I did mention to them that it's important that they're responsible in the things that they do, because it will make it harder for, well, I didn't say this specifically, but it will make it harder for the British government to support them where there are acts of violence. But let's be very clear about something. CGTN and Xinhua and other Chinese state media are focusing on that aspect of the protest now because that is happening, but they totally ignored the mainstream protests early on. What I've heard about is mainland students who go to Hong Kong and they've been brainwashed by state media to believe a certain thing about the protesters, and they have gradually changed their mind. However, what I've also heard is that some mainland students are now going back to the mainland because they don't feel safe in Hong Kong. Now, I'm not going to say that's a good situation, and I'm not going to say that's okay because some mainlanders have acted like nationalist idiots in other countries. What troubles me about it is, about that aspect, is that some of those mainland students had actually changed their mind when they came to Hong Kong. They had actually started to support the protests. But because they were targeted simply for being mainlanders, that put them off. So what I would say to those protesters, those hardcore protesters, is if you're attacking any mainlander just for being a mainlander, that is incredibly stupid. Um, I can understand that feelings are running very high, and you have absolutely every right, and I support you 100% in hating the Chinese communist regime. That's fine. Also hating the police for the brutality they've shown, because there has been a lot of brutality in Hong Kong that really is disgusting. Not a single police officer has been held to account for that, not a single one. So, whilst I do think the violent aspect of the protesters is wrong, I'm, I'm not going to lecture them too heavily for that, because they've put up with police brutality on a scale that would make many American forces look liberal. I mean, it's absolutely disgraceful. There's been reports of female protesters being sexually molested, even raped in one case in a police station. There's been evidence of students getting beaten, unarmed students getting beaten. there's a lot of things going on, and the fact that they're now arming themselves, I wouldn't expect people to be pacifists in that situation. But what I do think is stupid is mob behaviour, so attacking an individual, because that just looks ugly, whether that be a police officer or anyone else. I don't agree with mindless vandalism, just destroying Hong Kong. That's incredibly stupid. And I don't agree with targeting people just for having a different point of view. So if there is a mainlander who shouts at you or something, don't set them on fire. I mean, that's just a given. And I think the majority of protesters know this. I find it very difficult to believe that the majority of protesters would get involved in that sort of behaviour. But they do need to condemn those that are. Because they have the moral argument on their side. They have, many governments actually are sympathetic to them. Should they do more? Perhaps they should. But, there's been another development this week, which I haven't really had a chance to follow, but it could be significant. And that is that the British envoy, who's a Hong Kong resident, he doesn't have British citizenship yet, but Simon Cheng, who was, during the early part of the protest, he was abducted and brought to the mainland for questioning, Shenzhen, I believe, has now given testimony to British parliamentarians that he was tortured, that he suffered the effects of torture. So apparently Dominic Raab was fuming about this, was enraged by this. This is the sort of language that, is not really commonplace, because very often the British style is careful, polite diplomacy. For a British foreign minister, foreign secretary to be enraged by something, it shows this is definitely meaningful. So apparently Liu Xiaoming was summoned to explain that. I would have liked to be a fly on the wall in that meeting and tell you. Talk about tension, because Liu Xiaoming's attitude is, as he put it, Hong Kong's become from the pearl of Asia to the scum of Asia. But of course he takes no responsibility for the part his regime has played in that. By disregarding the Sino-British Joint Declaration. In fact, that's what yesterday's demonstration was about. So there are absolutely, Simon Cheng should be given a British passport and be made a British citizen. But I think we're getting to the point now where if this rumbles on, we're going to have to seriously consider diplomatic expulsions, like we done with the Russians last year. Because as far as I'm concerned, the Sino-Anglo golden era is just a facade. Cameron and Osborne spoke in glowing terms about it, so did Xi Jinping. From Xi's point of view, it was just, oh well, we've got the British on side now. And from Osborne and Cameron's point of view, oh well, Chinese money, that was a mistake. I don't think we could completely cut off ties with China, but you can still have a situation where there is, for example, diplomatic expulsions, but there'll be other sectors that are not government to government that can still, that won't, for example, affect Chinese tourists coming to the UK. If they do anything to our nationals, then that would just be further reason to escalate it, and we can say, well, China's picking on ordinary British citizens. So the way I see it at the moment is I will always be on the side of this movement, because I believe that their arguments are absolutely sound. I think that their grievances are absolutely valid. I am uncomfortable with the violent aspect some of the protests have taken. I'll be honest there. But it's human nature, if you push someone long enough, they're going to bite back. And it just is that they're maybe biting back at some of the, wrong people. If you're attacking a pro-Beijing resident, just argue with them, don't attack them. It's stupid. All that does is make you look like hooligans, especially if you're wearing the masks. Now, I know why they wear the masks, for protection, and because they don't want to be identified so that they could be potentially dragged to the mainland and tortured, the way Simon Cheng was. So that's not just the sort of, in other situations, if that was in Britain, I would take a different attitude. I'd think, oh, they're covering themselves because they're hooligans. In the context of Hong Kong, I think there's justification for that because they know that if they get identified, that they'll have no due process. They're dealing with an incredibly, at this point, corrupt police force. One of the flyers they handed me yesterday was actually showing Hong Kong officers grinning. In fact, I'll see if I can find this. Just bear with me a second. It's not handy, but basically, the flyer showed Hong Kong police officers grinning, grinning as they were firing projectiles at people. So that's the sort of police force they're going up against. In the university situation, they had to eventually surrender, but some of them were getting hypothermia because they'd been in the clothes that they had been soaked in from the water cannon or um, other devices. So this is just a really critical situation. I don't support violence, although I understand it. I understand the anger. But continued violence, unless it is in the context of strictly in self-defense. If it's just attacking the police for the sake of it, that's a different matter. If it's defending yourself, by all means, I support that 100%. And I think it's an absolute travesty that not a single police officer has been prosecuted. Inevitably, that's just going to fuel anger. And that's something the Carrie Lam administration doesn't seem to understand. The fact that it's double standard. She's calling on the protesters to end violence, but she won't hold a single police officer to account. Maybe if she had, there would be a different mentality. Um, so I think this is a crisis that has been built by China and by the Carrie Lam administration. I still think the protesters, although they have the moral argument, they have to be sensible. And what I also said to these young Hong Kongers yesterday was that not all mainlanders are blind nationalist idiots. When you get talking to them on a one-to-one basis, very often they will say they'll be pretty reasonable. So that's what I would say about the situation. I think Raab was right to be furious about the Simon Cheng situation. Um, I think I hope he really gave the Xiaoming a grilling with that one, because the usual Chinese excuses. This is a man who worked tirelessly for British diplomatic efforts, and China very likely tortured him. When it comes to his word over the CCP, I absolutely believe his word. So I think that we need to really take a hard line with China now. I think we've been too polite for too long. It's time we take up off the diplomatic gloves. We've just used a strategy. I actually spoke to a Tory candidate yesterday, and I said this to her, parliamentary candidate, because I was asking her about the government stance on this and so on, and I think she more or less agreed. She did say there were things going on behind the scenes that we may not know about, and that's probably true. But nevertheless, I think showing a visible sign of anger it's all very well being angry behind the scenes. I think it's important at this point to actually show that we're not going to play China's game. China demands respect. China insults this country. We should start using the same language. We should start saying the Chinese state has disrespected the British people. I'm not saying that specifically, but you get my point. Using the same language that they're using. And definitely we should seek to grant asylum and citizenship to any Hong Kongers who need it. There's a lot we can do that hasn't been done already. We could put pressure on universities to expel mainland Chinese students engaging in violence. I think there's a lot more that can be done. Ofcom could strip the license of CGTN. It's absolutely. When I told this to the students, I don't think they realised it. They were shocked, because I am shocked. I'm disgusted, in fact, that Ofcom or whoever, I believe it is Ofcom that is responsible for that. It defies belief. It really does. That not only TGTM but RT can still freely operate in this country. It's sickening, to be quite honest. I mean, CGTN is a network that is there to force confessions. It should not be allowed to operate in this country. So that's how I see the situation. Just to reiterate, in case, just to be absolutely crystal clear where I lie here, I am 110% on the side of the movement against CCP aggression in Hong Kong. But I cannot in good conscience support any acts of violence against individuals, even individual police, because that isn't going to get the police to sort of moderate their behaviour. That's only going to harden them. So I don't agree with that. I agree with self-defense. So I'm not calling for pacifism here. I think that self-defense is totally legitimate. Attacking the police just for the sake of it, or vandalising, no matter how angry you feel, that isn't going to get international support. So if the police are attacking you, attack them back. I support that, but don't give them a reason to do what they're doing. I mean, there's no reason for the things that they've been doing. But my point is, just be sensible, please, because it's going to be difficult for outsiders to support violence for the sake of violence. And I'll round it up there.